Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a company called MapmyIndia. You might have heard of them. They're sometimes referred to as like the Google Maps of India.
Mm-hmm.
But as we're going to see, they're a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So to really dig into this, we've got their Q2FY25 earnings call transcript.
Right.
And I think we're going to find some really interesting stuff here. One of the things that I found really interesting was how MapmyIndia really understands the Indian market in a way that I think a lot of global companies just don't.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, they've been able to leverage that knowledge to really carve out a niche for themselves.
Yeah, and their business model really reflects that. So for folks who aren't familiar with MapmyIndia, they basically have two main ways of making money.
Right.
The first is their automotive and mobility tech segment. So this is where they provide, maps and navigation software to car manufacturers like Hyundai and Kia.
Yeah, and they just had this massive deal with Hyundai Kia, a 5-year contract worth like 400 crore rupees.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge deal, and it really shows how much trust they've built in that sector.
Absolutely. And it's not just about providing a basic map. I mean, their data is incredibly detailed. They've got things like narrow alleyways that delivery drivers use, stuff that you wouldn't find on a typical map.
Yeah, and that's what makes them so valuable. They have this incredibly granular level of detail that really makes a difference in a place like India.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's not just cars.
Right.
Their second revenue stream comes from their consumer tech and enterprise segment.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where they offer APIs and SDKs to other businesses, government agencies, developers, basically anyone who wants to build location-based features into their own products and services.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. It's like they're becoming the backbone for this whole ecosystem of applications. We're talking e-commerce, logistics, urban planning, even augmented reality. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And that to me is their brilliance. It's not just about the maps themselves. It's about providing the building blocks for a location-based innovation across industries. It's a really smart strategy.
Absolutely.
Of course, no business is without its challenges.
Right.
And the transcript does mention that they've seen a bit of a slowdown in that consumer tech and enterprise segment. They're attributing that to the current economic climate, which is impacting their clients. Budgets are getting tighter and things like that.
Yeah, that's true. And I think we're seeing that across the board. A lot of companies are facing similar headwinds, but it seems like MapmyIndia is taking a long-term view. They're not panicking. They're focusing on building a sustainable business, and they're willing to invest in growth, even if it means a dip in their short-term profitability.
Right. And they're being really upfront about that in the transcript. They talk about how they're consciously investing in growth, which has led to a slight dip in their EBITDA margin. Now, for our listeners who might not be familiar with that term, think of EBITDA margin kind of like your personal savings rate. Yeah. It's basically how much money you're keeping after you've paid all your essential expenses.
Right. A lower margin means you're investing more back into the business.
Exactly.
Which is what they're doing. They're tightening their belts now, so to speak, so they can really expand in the future.
Yeah, and it seems like they have some pretty ambitious goals.
Oh, yeah.
They're talking about hitting INR 1,000 crores in revenue by FY 2027-28.
It's a big jump from where they are now.
For sure. But they have some interesting strategies in place. One that really stood out to me was their recent joint venture with Hyundai AutoEver in Indonesia. Mm-hmm. This is a really big deal because it marks their first major push in international markets.
Yeah, it's huge. And it's not just about selling maps to Hyundai in Indonesia.
Right, this is about taking their expertise and applying it to a whole new region. Southeast Asia is a massive market with huge growth potential.
Yeah, and they're not going in blindly. They're partnering with local agencies to make sure their maps are accurate and culturally relevant.
Yeah, I mean, they're really taking a nuanced approach to this expansion.
Yeah, and there's even talk that this joint venture could open doors for them beyond just the automotive sector. They've hinted that the data they're collecting could be used by their existing clients like Apple.
Wow. So it's like they're weaving this global web of location-based services, and this Indonesian venture is a key thread in that tapestry.
Exactly.
It's a really smart move. And on top of all that, they're also investing heavily in emerging technologies. We're talking the Internet of Things, drones, artificial intelligence.
All areas where location data is absolutely essential.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Autonomous vehicles need precise maps to navigate safely. Drones rely on location information for deliveries and all sorts of other tasks. And then you've got AI algorithms that can use location data to do things like personalize recommendations or optimize operations. It's incredible.
Yeah, it really is. Like, they're not just mapping the world, they're mapping the future.
Exactly. And that brings us to, I think, the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Google. I mean, MapmyIndia is essentially going head-to-head with a tech giant that dominates the global mapping market.
It's a David versus Goliath situation for sure.
Yeah, so how are they doing? How are they holding up in this battle?
Well, I think it's fair to say it's a tough fight. Google has enormous resources and a global presence, but MapmyIndia is carving out its own space by focusing on hyperlocal data, by providing solutions that are tailored to the specific needs of the Indian market.
Right, and they've had some real success with that. I mean, their Mapples app, their consumer-facing app, has over 28 million downloads. Yeah, so they're clearly resonating with Indian users.
Yeah.
But, let's be realistic. There are risks involved here.
Of course.
I mean, MapmyIndia is profitable, but they're also investing aggressively in growth, which, as we said earlier, has led to a dip in their EBITDA margin.
Yeah, that's one risk to keep an eye on. And their consumer business, in particular, that Mapples app, is another potential area of concern. They're still figuring out how to effectively monetize it.
Right. They're experimenting with in-app advertising, subscriptions, commission-based models, but it's a work in progress.
Yeah, it's a balancing act for sure. They need to grow their user base while also figuring out how to generate revenue from those users.
It's a classic challenge for any company in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a tough one. But I think this Indonesian venture is a really smart way to tackle it.
Yeah, and, they've chosen their partner wisely.
Right.
Hyundai Autoever, a subsidiary of Hyundai Kia, is already a big customer of MapmyIndia's in India.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's already a relationship there, a foundation of trust.
Exactly. They're not starting from scratch, which is huge. They understand each other. They know how to work together.
And Hyundai Kia already has a significant presence in Southeast Asia. So MapmyIndia can leverage their existing distribution channels.
Yeah, it's like they're getting a head start in a new market.
Exactly. Yeah. But what really impressed me was their approach to actually building these maps.
Oh, yeah.
They're not just, sending a bunch of engineers from India over to Indonesia.
Right.
They're actually partnering with local agencies.
That's smart.
Yeah, because, building accurate and relevant maps isn't just about the technology.
It's about understanding the local context.
Exactly. You need to know the roads, the cultural significance of certain locations. By working with local partners, they can tap into that expertise.
Yeah, it's like they're crowdsourcing on a hyper-local level.
Exactly. And they're getting insights from the people who know these streets best.
Makes sense.
And, the transcript even hints that this joint venture could open doors for MapmyIndia beyond just the automotive sector.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They've said that these maps could be used by their existing clients in the consumer tech and enterprise segment. Companies like Apple, for example.
Wow, so it's like a 2-for-1 deal?
Yeah, I mean, think about it. MapmyIndia gets to enter a new market and strengthen their ties with a major customer like Hyundai. And their existing clients get access to expanded geographical coverage.
Everyone wins.
Exactly. It's a win-win. It creates this powerful network effect that really amplifies their reach.
Yeah, it's a brilliant strategy.
And of course, we can't forget about the financial implications.
Right.
While we don't have exact figures yet, they've projected that this joint venture could generate millions of dollars in revenue over the next 5 years.
That's huge, especially considering they'll also be making money from outsourcing the map development work to their team in India.
It's a double revenue boost. But of course, venturing into international markets always comes with its own set of challenges.
Yeah, different cultures, different regulations, different way of doing business.
Exactly. So how is MapmyIndia preparing to navigate these complexities?
Well, the transcript doesn't go into a ton of detail about their specific risk mitigation strategies for the joint venture.
Right.
But I think we can get a sense of their approach by looking at their overall philosophy.
Yeah.
They really emphasize partnerships, not just with Hyundai Autoever, but also with these local agencies.
Right.
And that helps to spread the risk and leverage that local expertise.
It's like they're building a safety net.
Exactly. And they're also being very deliberate about their rollout. They've said that they don't expect to see significant revenue from the joint venture until FY26.
Yeah, so they're not rushing into things.
They're taking their time, laying the groundwork, building relationships, making sure they have the right infrastructure in place before they really start pushing for growth.
It's a long-term game.
Exactly.
And, it's important to remember that this international expansion is just one part of their overall strategy.
Right.
They're also making significant investments in these emerging technologies like IoT drones and AI.
Mm-hmm.
So how do those investments fit into their broader vision?
Well, I think it all comes back to location data.
Okay.
These technologies are all deeply intertwined with location. I mean, you can't have autonomous vehicles without precise maps.
Right.
Drones rely on accurate location data for deliveries and all sorts of other things. And AI algorithms use location data to personalize recommendations, optimize operations. It's all connected.
So they're not just creating maps. It's like they're building this whole ecosystem of location-based services.
Yeah, and I think that's really where they're going. They're not just a mapping company anymore. They're becoming a location intelligence powerhouse.
That's a pretty exciting vision. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. There are still challenges and risks to consider.
Oh, for sure. And no business is immune to challenges.
One area that we need to keep an eye on is their consumer business.
Mm-hmm.
The Mapples app is popular, but they're still figuring out how to make money from it.
Yeah, it's that balance between growing the user base and generating revenue.
Exactly. And then there's a broader economic slowdown that could impact their clients' spending patterns, which could in turn affect MapmyIndia's revenue growth.
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
But, they seem to be aware of these challenges, and they're taking steps to mitigate them.
Yeah, they seem to be taking a long-term view, focusing on building a resilient business that can weather those economic fluctuations.
And they do have a strong track record of profitability.
That's true. They're not just a startup burning through cash. They're making money.
Right. So they have a bit of breathing room to navigate these uncertain times.
Exactly.
And their recent performance shows that they're on the right track.
Yeah, their revenue is still growing, and they're making strategic investments for the future.
Even if it means a dip in their profit margins in the short term.
Right. It's a trade-off, but it seems like a smart one.
Yeah, they're playing the long game.
And it's a game that they seem to be winning.
I agree. It's a really inspiring story.
Yeah.
A homegrown Indian company taking on global giants, innovating at a rapid pace, and shaping the future of a really critical industry.
And it's a story that's just getting started.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see where they go from here. Speaking of which, I'm curious to see, how they're actually performing right now. What do the numbers tell us?
Well, their recent performance definitely suggests they're headed in the right direction. In the first half of FY25, their revenue grew by 14% year on year, reaching INR 205 crores.
Okay, not bad. And that's in the current economic climate.
Yeah, and their automotive and mobility tech segment is leading the charge with a growth rate of 19.3%.
Wow. So that big Hyundai-Kia deal is really paying off.
It seems to be. Now, their consumer tech and enterprise segment has been a bit slower.
Right.
Around 8.2% growth, which, as we mentioned earlier, is probably due to those broader economic challenges.
Yeah, their clients just aren't spending as much.
Exactly. But I think the important thing to remember is that this segment represents a huge opportunity for future growth.
Right, as they expand their offerings and tap into new markets.
Exactly.
Okay, so they're growing at a pretty healthy pace. What about profitability? Have those investments in future growth impacted their bottom line at all?
Yeah, their EBITDA margin for the first half of FY25 was 39.1%, which is slightly lower than the 43.2% they had in the same period last year.
Okay, so there's been a dip, but that's because they're investing so heavily in growth.
Yeah, exactly. It's a conscious decision to prioritize long-term growth over short-term gains.
Yeah, it's a bold move. But it shows a lot of confidence in their vision.
I agree. And, they're not just throwing money at every opportunity. They're being very strategic about their investments.
Okay, good. So what are some of the steps they're taking to manage that risk?
Well, one key strategy is diversification. They're not overly reliant on any single revenue stream or customer.
Right.
Their automotive and mobility tech segment provides a solid foundation, but they're also growing their consumer tech and enterprise segment. And then there are those international expansion plans.
Yeah, so it's like a don't put all your eggs in one basket approach.
Exactly. And their strategic partnerships, like the joint venture with Hyundai AutoEver, further mitigate that risk.
Okay, how so?
Well, by collaborating with established players, they can share the burden, leverage each other's strengths, and navigate new markets more effectively.
Yeah, that makes sense. So they're diversifying their revenue streams, building strong partnerships, and taking a measured approach to expansion. Seems like they're doing everything right.
They seem to be covering all the bases, for sure.
So let's talk long-term vision. Where do they see themselves in the next, 5 to 10 years?
Well, they haven't laid out a specific 10-year plan.
Right.
But I think their recent actions and statements paint a pretty clear picture.
Okay, what is it?
They want to be much more than just a mapping company. They're aiming to be a leading provider of location intelligence.
So not just maps, but all the insights and applications that come from location data.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. Location data can be used for everything from hyper-personalized advertising to smart city planning to disaster response, even advancements in healthcare.
Yeah, the possibilities are endless.
And they're building a platform that can support all of those applications.
And their expertise in the Indian market gives them a unique advantage.
Absolutely. I mean, they understand that market better than anyone.
So it's an exciting time for MapmyIndia. They're challenging the status quo, pushing boundaries, and redefining what's possible with location data.
And they're doing it all while staying true to their core values.
Right, providing accurate, reliable, hyperlocal data.
Exactly.
It's really inspiring to see. It shows that you don't have to be a global behemoth to make a real impact.
I agree. MapmyIndia is proving that innovation and adaptability can take you a long way.
Well said. As we go about our day, we should all think about how location data is impacting our lives and the businesses we interact with. It's everywhere.
It really is. And it's only going to become more important in the future. So I'll leave you with this. Do you think MapmyIndia can become the go-to location platform in India?
Maybe even surpass Google in certain areas.
It's an interesting question. Only time will tell.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. But this has been a fascinating look at MapmyIndia, a company that's truly shaping the future. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mike.